Hello, everyone. It's me, Kirk Mastin, here at Mastin Labs, and today we're going to be talking about artificial light and editing with both tungsten, fluorescent, mixed lighting, and flash and strobe. Some people call it flash, some people call it strobe. Call it what you will. It's not from the sun. Um, so I'm going to give everybody a chance here to trickle into the event. And I'd love to give a few shout outs to whoever is joining us. We have people from all over the world that are joining us. It's really incredible to see how much the community has grown, and we get people from literally every continent and island and place in the world at this point, which is very, very cool. Let me get down to where the actual event is starting on my page. Okay, here we go. I have to scroll like 400 minutes down the Facebook page to get to this event because we got so much going on. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome again. Today, we're going to be talking about artificial light, mixed lighting, strobe, flash, everything that gets you down as a photographer because it should actually make you excited. There's a lot of creative possibilities with artificial light, and I want to help you edit with that kind of light and get a great look using Mastin Labs. I'm speaking to you from Seattle. I'd love to hear where you're coming to us from. So just say in the comments, and I will give you a shout out. I'd love to see returning community members and new people as well. We've got Lorraine J. Rosa joining us. We've got Casey Cosley joining us. We have Kyle Meck joining us. Some other people are joining us. We have 42 people that just came in through the door, but they're all sitting in the back with the hoodies up, pretending that they're not there. But I see you. I see you all there. It's going to be a good show today. I like to do these shout outs in the beginning because often these pop up on people's feeds and they're like they've got a sandwich in their mouth and they're like just finishing something and they got to like wipe off their mouth, put it down, and like get ready to watch because it's going to be really good. So we give them that chance. We got Alex Ferrick from Philadelphia. So Lorraine is from New York. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Scott Frazee. Is it Frazee or Frazee? From St. Louis, Missouri. Amy Keel is watching, who I know. She's in Seattle. Yes, we got some more people coming in. Amy Scharf from Central Texas. Good day to you. And I'm wondering how many people who are joining us right now actually shoot in artificial or mixed light, or they prefer to, and how many people are here just to see how to survive it. So we got Veniza Zanetta Zadra from Porto Alegre, Brazil. I remember you. I edited one of your photos the last time, one or two photos. Kelso Miguel is here. I also edited one of Kelso's photos not too long ago. Yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. Okay, so let's get started. Are you guys ready to get started? Yes. Okay, cool. All right, again, today's show is about artificial light. It's going to be in two parts. In the first part, I'm going to go over how to get really good results in mixed lighting, in tungsten lighting, fluorescent lighting, daylight, fluorescent, tungsten, daylight, all those mixes. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to be talking specifically about shooting with strobe and flash. They're the same thing essentially, and how to get a nice edit when you're using that kind of light. So it's going to be two parts. I'm also going to dive into Capture One as well. We're going to do a little bit of Lightroom, a little bit of Capture One, so you'll see the whole thing. Okay, so let's start. I've got some basic tips that I've kind of compiled over the last 20 years that have helped me shoot in mixed lighting and with strobe. And especially if you're doing a digital workflow with presets or styles. So these are my tips. It's kind of a wide-ranging subject, but this will get you started. First of all, when you are editing in mixed light or with strobe or flash, the preset that you use, which is based on real film, it really matters. Not everything is going to work really well, and that's because the films that we emulate for Capture One and Lightroom, some of them were not meant to be shot in mixed light. Clearly not meant to. Others were, and some are just not suited to it. And it's the same with the film as it is with the digital emulation. So it's really important what you pick. I always tell people, if you're just starting out with some really tricky lighting situation, start with Portra 160 from the Portra original pack. It has very low saturation, low contrast, and it's very easy to edit with. And in fact, your color balance can be quite a bit off, and it'll still look pretty good, or it'll look great, actually, most of the time. However, you can really jump around, and I'll show you that in the edits here in a minute, and see what works depending on the light. Secondly, and this is really important, mixed light. So where you've got like tungsten from one light source and then daylight from, say, a window, maybe you even have some neon mixed in, like a neon sign from somewhere else. Mixed light is much trickier to edit in than just a single light source. And that single light source doesn't have to be the sun. What I mean is, the moment you're mixing two different colors of light together, like they're coming from different sides of your subject, you're in a mixed lighting situation. And that is more problematic than a single light situation, even if the single light that is lighting your subject is a weird neon light or something. It's much easier to correct that. But when it's mixed, it's hard. And you will often have to slide the white balance slider and the tint slider much farther than you've ever slid it before, and it may seem a little strange or uncomfortable, but just get used to it. You're not going to break the photo, and you sometimes have to do extreme adjustments to make it work. But it's okay. It's cool. That's just how it is. It's the miracle of digital technology. I grew up shooting film, and none of that was possible. So it's really cool, and I'll show you. Okay, third, edit for skin tones. And I would say that in any editing session I do, any of the 60 plus videos like this that I've done, I always say edit for skin tones first and then let everything else fall into place. Get your skin tones right. Don't worry about anything else. In mixed light, you may have to compromise. Again, mixed light means light is coming from one side. You've got, fluorescent coming from this side, and you've got daylight coming from this side, or more often tungsten and daylight. If you're editing in a split situation like that, and I've got tungsten on this side of my face, daylight on this side of my face and tungsten on this side, they have different color casts, and you're going to have to try to get the best skin tones you can, and usually you're going to have to pick a side of my face to get perfect, and the other side's going to be wrong because they're different colored lights. Sometimes you can split the baby and kind of just, get halfway right on both sides and compromise. But anyway, that's what I mean by editing for skin tones. Okay. Fourth, the all hard tone profile can help if your image is muddy. It just does, and I will show you why. And then fifth, and this is kind of a secret gotcha, something to keep in mind when you're shooting in any kind of bad lighting situation, is that the higher the ISO you use when you're shooting your digital camera, the less quality color information will be in the raw file. So if you're shooting in just like a cuckoo banana, mixed lighting situation with like terrible lighting, and you're shooting it at ISO 200, you can do a lot with that image. You can do a lot to fix that color and make it beautiful. If you're shooting at 6400 ISO or like, 12,000 something, or 16,000 or 30,000 ISO, whatever, you have very little information to work with. The sensor is getting you that image, but at the price of less quality color information. So it makes your edit really hard later. Those are the main tips. I'll go through them more as I go through these images and just kind of show you what I mean. Okay. So almost all of the images today are from the community. I've got a ton of them here. I'll show you what I'm working with here. We've got outdoor, natural light, neon light, natural LED light, flash, mixed light, everything. So if I'm editing and you want to see something else or you have questions, please ask them in the comments, and either Kyle or Casey will hold up their hands and let me know there's a question, and I'll answer it for you live. All right. So on this first image, we've got a lot of different lighting happening here. We've got some kind of neon or sodium vapor kind of greenish light coming from the front. You can see it down on this like, what are these things called? They make it so you can't drive there. I forget what they're called. Anyway, it's green from that. If you cruise on back here in the background, we've got red neon light. We've got ambient light from all these signs hitting everywhere. These little tiny lights, these little like bistro lights are tungsten. And on the front here, we've got, again, that kind of, I don't know, maybe it's a sodium vapor light or something, a fluorescent light that's kind of green on the front. This is an extremely mixed lighting situation. It's shot at 1600 ISO. The exposure is actually pretty much perfect. That's going to help a lot. If it was underexposed, we would run into problems real fast. And I can show you how you can use, say, if you're just really unsure what to do, you can just go right into Portrait Original and do Portrait 160. And just that plus a little exposure bump, and you have an image that is totally usable, looks fine, looks great. If you want it to be a little bit more stylized, I was playing around with this image earlier. If you go into the Fujicolor Everyday Original pack, Superia 400 continues to be kind of this miracle preset. It really enhances a lot of the colors in a really nice way and keeps the contrast and the shadows under control the same way that Portrait 160 does. So that's just Superia 400 applied, tiny exposure bump, and you have these like luscious, rich, beautiful colors. If I wanted to, okay, so now I'm going to get to the part about, so how do you adjust for skin tones in a mixed lighting situation? Fortunately, this model's face is completely illuminated by that kind of greenish light coming from the front. So using the tint slider, remember what I said, adjust for skin and ignore the rest. I can adjust for this model's skin tone pretty easily just using the tint slider. So I'm going to cancel out a little bit of that green by going towards magenta. And then I like the warmth of this image, but I'm going to play around with making it a little bit cooler. So let's cool it off just a little bit. And I'm going to zoom out here. So I cooled it down. I added a little bit of magenta. It's going to make the mixed lighting behind the model a lot more magenta, a lot more red, but I don't really care because I'm starting to neutralize the skin tone and even the concrete here in the front just by some adjustments with tint and temperature. So there is before and after. I'll do a really large one so you can see. So this is before. Again, a really nicely exposed image, and then that is after. So this is shot by Chris Daniels, really good, great photographer. Yeah, thank you for shooting this. Okay, so moving on. We have the same model, but this time illuminated just by a neon sign. The trickiness of an image like this, or say an image like this, or like this, or even an image like this, is that we have an extreme contrast range. We're going from like pure black to illumination on one side. However, it is not a mixed lighting situation. There is a bright neon green light, but it's only one light. It's not like we've got two lights mixing. So we can edit this image pretty easily. Let me see here. Let's do something kind of neutral. Let's do Portrait 400. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, Portrait 400, increase the exposure. The way the presets and styles are made is that they protect highlights really, really well, the same way that film does, like actual real film. So you can crank up the exposure pretty high and not have any consequences. There's not even any additional noise. So I applied Portrait 400, increased the exposure. Now what I can do is I can try canceling some of the green, because that's the dominant color, and see if I can bring in, I'm not going for natural skin tone, but maybe just a little bit of variety in the image. So maybe somewhere else in the image, oh, there we go. We can get something else to happen. So just by increasing the tint slider towards magenta, we're starting to get some difference here in this window, like a little bit of a difference in color, which is kind of cool. So I don't know. I'm gonna leave that. It feels a little more film-like, especially since the highlights are going a little bit magenta to balance out that green. And then I can play with temperature and warm it up just a little bit. So there is before and after. It's very subtle. There's not a huge change, but we've added a really nice pop of micro contrast, like around the eye. We've preserved all the detail, and we've added a little bit of differentiation in the window to make it a little more interesting. I like to have a little bit of a difference, so it's not just like a green palette all the way across. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to go to, actually, this is a good example too. So in this image, it looks really tricky, but again, we have only one kind of consistent light source throughout the image. So it's not necessarily a mixed lighting situation. All of these lights on this circus stuff here, I'm gonna assume that it's all LED. They look like LED lights. There's like these little tiny dots in here all the way around. LED light is essentially white light. It's actually very well corrected, kind of like daylight. So there are no like sodium vapor lamps or any kind of street lamps or anything adding a green cast. So this image is actually lit pretty evenly with a very natural light. What's awesome about that is that I can use nearly any preset or style and get a nice result. So you just pretend that you're not shooting at daytime, but you're shooting in clean light because it's all the same kind of light. I could go to into the Adventure Everyday Original Pack and try gold. See how that looks. So there's gold, and I just increase the exposure. And in fact, strangely enough, I can warm this up. That LED light is so cool that it's actually probably cooler than daylight, that it actually needs to be warmed up to kind of keep that, I don't know, nostalgic feeling, I guess. And Gold 200 is that kind of film. So there you go. That's a really simple, beautiful film-like edit in just a few clicks. Gold 200 from the Adventure Everyday Pack, increasing the exposure and warming it up. I didn't even have to touch tint. So here's before and after. And you can see there's just really nice, deep, rich color. It's a little bit grainy, but that's only because we've brightened, increased the exposure a little bit on the photo. But it's not even like displeasing grain. And if we wanted to hide that, we could use like 35 millimeter grain. Yeah, 35 millimeter grain looks pretty good. What that does is it actually covers up the noise in the image with more of a thoughtful grain pattern, and now it looks really good. It just looks like Gold 200 film. So, very cool. This is shot down in Sayulita, where we all went as a company last Christmas, or around last year. Okay, so let's go to something that is more of your typical, not typical, but more of a wedding situation for those wedding photographers that are watching. You've probably had to deal with this where you're just like shooting at, let's see, I shot this photo a while back, shot at 3200 ISO with a 35 millimeter lens at f2 at an 80th of a second. So I'm kind of pushing this as far as it goes. It's lit with sparklers. And I don't believe there was any other light. So this is just a bunch of sparklers everywhere. One nice thing about this, or two nice things, is again, this isn't a mixed lighting situation. This is a single light source or single color of light. It is the sparkler light. And that's going to make it possible to get really accurate skin tones. I know you're not going to believe it, but you can with this image. And you can with nearly any preset or style that we make, because it is a single light source. Even though it's an artificial light, it's a single light source. So this plays into the rule of sliding the sliders way farther than you ever thought you should. You just get used to it. So let's do, I don't know. I'm going to go back to my current favorite, Superior 400. Apply that. And now, most of the time, people probably wouldn't be comfortable sliding the slider this far, but just watch what you can do. So I'm just sliding it, and we have fairly nice skin tones hiding in this image. In fact, let's see. I'm going to zoom in. It's a little bit red on this side, a little bit yellow on this side, but overall the skin tone looks pretty darn good for going from that. And even the tones look really nice. And that's just by sliding this temperature slider almost all the way to the left. So I actually, so this being my image, I was teaching at a workshop, and I had some people, I was teaching editing. And this was one of the test images, and a lot of my students were afraid to slide the slider that far. Or not afraid, but they just had never done it. And that is, it's that extreme adjustment that actually canceled out that really strong orange-yellow cast and brought back good skin tones. So don't be afraid to do it. I could even go lower if I wanted. I'm almost maxing out the slider. And then I also mentioned earlier, if the image feels a little bit muddy, you can use all hard. So there's all hard. So here's before, and there's after. And what all hard is a tone profile that comes with every pack. There are 1, 2, 3, I should know the number, 7. Wait, 1, 2, 3, no, there's 6. There's 6 tone profiles. I should know this after 10 years. There are 6, and they all affect the image in a slightly different way. They come from the scanner that all the film emulations are made on, and they are tools to help you solve lighting issues. There's all hard, all soft, highlight soft, shadow hard, and shadow soft. Anything with the word highlight in it just targets highlights. Anything with shadow in it targets shadows. And when it says all hard or all soft, it means make all the shadows hard, or all of the shadow and highlights hard, or all of the highlights and shadows soft. So bring out detail. So in this image, by adding all hard, I've bumped up the contrast in the highlights and shadows, and it kind of reduced the muddiness that I talked about earlier in the very beginning. I'm going to move on over to Capture One now, show you a few more edits, and I will be jumping back and forth. All right. Here we are in Capture One, everybody. Let's do this image I really, really enjoy. So this is by Diana Bartos. I love it. I have a photojournalism background, so I really identify with images like this. Looks like it was taken at some kind of a dude ranch or something. But it looks really nice. This was lit with off-camera strobe or flash. I'm guessing I can see it in the catch lights in her eyes. So these little catch lights here, if I zoom in like 1,000,000%, sometimes you can even look into the eyes of the subject and see the exact lighting setup that they used. That's a little pro tip here. This looks like some kind of Octobank or small softbox, just by the shape of the highlights in her eyes. So some kind of pro setup, but it looks really good, and it's balanced with the ambient light around her. Great skill to learn. Really brings her out of the background. So, okay. So this image uses flash and daylight. I mean, it's cloudy daylight, and the color temperature of a flash is very close to the color temperature of daylight. That's intentional, so that you can mix the two. So this isn't too hard of an edit. For this image, I'm going to try gold 200, or let me see. I think gold 200 looks good. So apply gold 200. It adds a lot of contrast and color to it, but in a very nice way. I'm going to do all soft. And then I'm going to bring down the temperature just a tiny bit. And I'm also going to bring down the exposure just a tiny, tiny bit. So really nice image. One thing I noticed in this image is it's shot with a very shallow depth of field. So probably nearly wide open. One thing that would be nice for this image would be to use the lens correction feature. So if I turn lens correction on, it brings out all those shadowy areas on the side. And I'm actually going to, I like a little bit of it. So I'm going to go into the lens correction section and I'm going to cancel out a little bit of the correction. So this is, it's kind of advanced. Well, not really. It's like an extra little step. But right about there looks perfect to me. Go back to the Mastin Labs workspace, and that looks good. Actually, I'm going to warm it up just a tiny bit. There we go. Beautiful image. I love this image. Again, I just can't say how much, I can't say enough how much I love photojournalism. So thank you for sending this in, Diana. And this is before, and this is after. Kodak Gold 200 is great for kind of real life moments, documentary moments. It's just got those really nice warm skin tones that I just love from Kodak Gold. It's my favorite 35 millimeter film. And then it's also got the distinctive kind of blue-green shadows, just slightly blue-green. And that contrast is beautiful. Like warm skin, cool shadows. I really, really like it. If this is too much punch, you could also use, let me see here. We've got a lot of things coming to Capture One. It's a secret. But until that happens, you could also use, say, like Fuji 400H. So that kind of knocks down that warm glow that I love about Kodak Gold, and it makes it a little more neutral. So if you wanted to have more of a neutral look with artificial light, you could use something like 400H, especially in this situation where you've got flash mixing with daylight, which are very similar. So it works all the way across. And we have a question.
Yeah, Kristen asks, do you ever use radial or graduated filters to help with stark differences and like temperature, white balance issues in a photo?
So Kristen? Okay, so Kristen asks, do you ever use radial filters to help you deal with uneven lighting, weird lighting, etc., right? To even it out?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. That's not a bad way to go. It depends on what kind of shooter you are. So if you are a high volume shooter, meaning like if you're a wedding photographer, portrait shooter, I highly advise against using brushes or radial filters, because at the end of the day, you just can't work that way if you're editing 600 images. Like, it's totally inefficient. It might be fun for a few years to edit a lot of photos, but I guarantee you it gets old and you just want to get through it, because it's the making of the photo, the original capture of it, I think that most people enjoy the most later in their career, not so much being behind a computer, even though that is fun in the beginning. So I advise against using radial filters. They work, but what I really advise is understanding the light that you're shooting in and making sure that you don't need them later. So on that note, I'll give you a tip. Let's see if I have a photo here that would help. This might help. Okay. So this image is by Paul Souza. So what I mean about not putting yourself in a situation where you need a radial filter or a brush to even out mixed lighting is to make sure you're not in mixed lighting, if possible. So this is the only example I could pull out of what we have for today. But if I was shooting a wedding and I was in a room where people are getting ready and there's a big like window light on one side, you know, like windows on one side, it's very typical. and there was a bride or someone getting ready near the light, which would be ideal because you have that nice soft window light, I would actually go around the room and turn off all the other types of light sources. So I go around the room and like turn off all the tungsten lights, any light that was not daylight, or if it wasn't like LED light, which is rare. For the most part, I turn everything else off, so we had only one light source. If I needed more light on the other side of the person, I would add a reflector, but I would try to keep it pure, clean light, so I'm not in a situation where I have to use a radial brush or a radial filter or a brush to correct like 600 images. Because if you spend all that time fixing mixed lighting situations that you could have avoided, that's money out of your own pocket. Your time is money, so you want to avoid it if you can. So that's my super insanely long explanation, but that's what I do. So take control of the lighting wherever you are. That is my advice. If you have to use a radial brush, you can. It's just going to take you all day, but it's totally doable. That's why it exists, or one of the reasons it exists. Okay, so this is a studio shot, completely artificial lighting, but really well done. So I'm assuming that there is a reflector on her right side and then some kind of key light on the left side, or maybe a key light on the left side and a fill light on the right side, if this person actually uses strobes a lot, which would be pretty cool. Again, this image is pretty easy to edit because it's a single light source. So you could use anything really. So 400H, just apply that, and I would warm it up just a tiny bit. And actually, I'm going to go a little more green. That's too far. Just a tiny bit. The barest amount. There we go. There you go. Done. Super easy. This is all artificial light in a studio, but the photographer made sure that it was one light source, one color of light, one Kelvin amount or Kelvin value. Kelvin is how you measure the color of light. And this photographer also made sure that there was a fill light, which is just a really good practice to have anyway, if you can. So that makes shooting in artificial light way easier. And this is just like studio photography 101, is learning to, control your light, make sure that there's a fill light and a key light. And I highly suggest researching this on the internet, watching a lot of YouTube videos, because learning how to light in a studio situation with artificial light is a huge skill to have and will make you truly a professional. That's a great skill. Something I regret that I didn't learn earlier. Okay, so thank you, Paul Souza. All right, this is by Jordan Andrew. Let's see, it's truncating the name here. Jordan Andrew Reynolds, and Jordan wanted portrait pushed. So this image looks like it was also shot with actually some kind of giant octobox or giant soft light. I say that because this light is diffused, but it also appears to be a very large light source. There aren't any harsh shadows under these leaves. There's no harsh shadows anywhere, really. So I'm assuming that this person brought a giant light outside, overpowered the sun, meaning shot the light brighter than the sun to completely control the light and take away the shadows. And this is providing a really nice base for editing. Again, because it's not mixed light. This person overpowered the sun, I think, and is giving this whole image nice, clean light. You could use anything and it'll look good. So they want a portrait pushed, which is not in Capture One yet. I say yet. So one day, yes. So I'm just going to do a quick edit from the Adventure Everyday Original Pack. So we'll do, we'll do gold. Let's see. Let's do Ektar. That looks nice. Okay, so this is Ektar. This is our super saturated, colorful, punchy film. One of my favorites. I just apply it. I'm going to drop the exposure just a tiny bit. The entire image is tending to be trending towards being a little bit green, so I'm going to balance that out with the tint slider. Let's see, right about, too far. Right about there looks good. Yeah. And then I'm going to do, let's see how it looks with lens correction on. Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, so lens correction on, it gets rid of a little bit of distortion around the edges. And lastly, I might do a tone profile. Let's see how all soft looks and all hard. It really depends on the vibe you want. If you want this to be a little punchier, then you would use like all hard or shadow hard. If you wanted to recover some of the highlights on the edge of this window frame, then you could use highlight soft. Actually, that's perfect. I'm gonna do highlight soft. I like how everything is. I don't want to mess with anything else. So it's a very subtle adjustment just to protect the whites up here with this artificial light. So very cool photo, lots of detail. I love how Capture One renders fine detail. It is pretty outstanding, and it's very three-dimensional. So this photo looks great. So thank you, Jordan. It's a really, really awesome photo. Okay, let me do one more kind of studio image in Capture One. Okay, so let's do this one. This is going to be a very tricky image because there's no fill light on the right side of this image. It's going to be very contrasty. I mean, there's a tiny catch light in his eye. So I'm going to do the best I can. And this image is going to be a little more difficult to edit, but I'll show you what I do to get through it. This is all shot with a single softbox on the left side. So it's one light source. Again, that's great. It's not mixed, so we don't need any brushes or anything for that. Yeah, we'll just do what we can. So it's very contrasty. I'm going to use Fuji 400H. I'm using Fuji 400H because it's a naturally low contrast film, so I don't want to add even more, I don't want to add too much more contrast to this image. It is a raw file, so before I even added that, there's already a lot of contrast. I mean, raw files are supposed to be super flat, and there's already a lot of contrast. So I'm going to add it. The skin tones look great, nice colors. Again, there's no information on this side. I can play with the tone profiles and see if I can bring that out. So I'm going to do all soft or maybe shadow soft. Let's see here. Yeah, it brings it out a little bit. That will let me increase the exposure more, so I can, if I want to, I can try to kind of jerk this photo around and get more information out of the right side, but it's looking pretty tough. Let's see. I might warm it up a little bit too. That looks good. Maybe a little bit too warm. Right about there. Okay. So there you go. That's what I can do with this image because it has no fill light. If there was a fill light over here, we would have a little bit more information. I could take a brush and try to brush this out a little bit. It's not going to be super nice just because there's just not much here. Let me see. Okay, come on. There we go. Yeah, this could take a little while to bring this all back out. But yes, you could totally use a radial filter or a brush to bring out the right side of his face. You will have to, for example, like decrease the saturation because you're doing a lot of dodging in a very dark area. But you could do it. It's just a lot of work. This is what I mean. Like if you had to do this to 600 images, whatever you made on the event, you're going to lose in just the time that you're spending fixing it. So I recommend using fill light in this situation, or if you're in a mixed lighting situation, really being careful to control that light. But it still looks like a really cool image. I mean, it's I don't know, it's very nice. It's very thoughtful. It's a piercing look. And here is the before and the after. Still looks really good. Or you could just make it black and white, That's the old school situation. If you're in difficult light, just make it black and white. Okay, I'm gonna move back over to Lightroom here and finish it up. If you have any questions as I go, please ask them. I am gonna do my best to anticipate all the questions you have, but as you can see as I edit, a lot of it is very much common sense. Um, and really, the main thing is don't be afraid to really jerk these temperature and tint sliders around, and then also to experiment with what preset or style looks best for that image. They're very, very different. I mean, these are completely different films. You know, Ektar is about as far away as you can get from Fuji 400H, and they're both super popular. So you may have to try more than one thing. Um, I'm going to edit this one without any presets at all, just to show you kind of the fundamentals. So this was shot, let's see here, 1600 ISO, very, very yellow-orange light. This is all tungsten light and candles. So tungsten just means, well, the color of tungsten light is very orange. And again, you can fix most of this just with the temperature slider. This may seem super basic. I mean, it is very basic, but you wouldn't believe how many people have missed just trying that, just trying to like correct out all of that orange just with the white balance slider. I found a lot of people when they're starting to shoot artificial light, they just kind of give up right off the bat. They're just like, oh, this image is just totally jacked up. There's no way I can fix it. Shooting really low light, there's no way. And then it's just sliding that slider quite a bit farther than you ever thought you could. So yeah, I mean, I'll do this one in reverse. So temperature down, I can then go pick a preset or a style, and there you go. I'll go down a little bit more in temperature, but beautiful image, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, super easy edit. In fact, I probably corrected the yellow out too much. You want it to be a little bit warm and cozy. So very, very simple. Okay, I'll do two more and then we'll wrap it up. If you have a question for me, you better get it in now, or else, hold your peace. But we will be doing more of these. We do these every single week. So, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, so this is from Chris Brown. It's a studio test shoot from 2020. Oh, wait, no, this is Chris Brown. This is from Diana Bartos. Oh, cool. Who did this photo? Sweet. So it looks like Diana is really into controlling her light. That's awesome. Good. That'll pay off big dividends later. That's kind of like what makes a commercial shooter, is being able to control light. So this image has the most mixed light of all. Like, there's all kinds of light happening here. We have a split light situation with purple and green lights. And then in the background, we have like some kind of light trail. Maybe someone was walking around with lights going like that. What's the exposure time? This is a 10-second exposure, my friends. So I'm assuming that the background was completely black, and for 10 seconds, someone walked around and waved like LED lights and made this cool background, and then the flash popped. It was probably a completely dark room. The flash popped, captured Chris Brown, and then it combines the two, just using basically like knowledge of how to use light. This is great. This reminds me of being at Brooks a million years ago and learning a lot about light. Okay, so this image is mixed lighting. I don't even know where it's going to go myself. So let's try some stuff. Fuji Color C200, that's a little bit too much. Let's see here. Let's try something from the Adventure Everyday pack. Okay, Ektar's a little bit too saturated. Gold's not saturated enough. And as you can see, I'm actually just poking around. If you showed me this photo and you were like, what preset should I use? Like, is there a go-to? No, there isn't, because there's so many colors happening here that every film emulation is going to treat it differently. Some films emphasize green, some emphasize golden colors. It's really up to what you want. So I think Fuji 400H looks pretty nice. So I'm going to go with that. Fuji 400H. I'm going to drop the exposure just a tiny bit, and I'm going to warm it up. Now, I'm going to do a trick for you to show you what I mean about having to compromise on skin tone. If you wanted to, say, correct one skin tone or correct some of his skin tone out to be perfect. His face is evenly lit, or not evenly lit, completely split by magenta and green, which are opposites of each other. So, this is a fascinating way to show you, I think. If I correct out the magenta, you correct it out with green. So if you see the slider over here, it goes from green to magenta. So if I want to correct out the magenta, I would just slide towards green. So let's correct for the top of his face. All right. So if I zoomed way, way in, you would see, whoops, okay, you would see that we're starting to get to somewhat normal skin tone on just this little tiny part of his face. But the other, and then even his arm, look at, we're starting to get like normal skin tone. But look at the other side of his face. It's like crazy land. It's like all green. So let's pretend, let's go back to where we started. Let's say we want to correct out the green. This is a perfect extreme example. So you would slide the tint slider towards magenta, and that is going to correct out the green. And look at that beautiful skin tone right underneath. It's almost like just taking a rag and wiping off like the wrong, like this green cast that was all over him, like it was on a piece of glass, and you're just wiping it off, and you're like, oh, there's good skin tone under there. Here's his natural skin tone. I'm going to warm it up just a little bit. So there you go. Look at that. Normal skin tone. And then we went all the way to the other side, and then we have normal skin tone on the other side. This is a fascinating image to show you exactly what I mean about mixed lighting. So intentional mixed lighting. And, you know, it was made to be split lighting like this, magenta and green. So I'm going to leave it in the middle. I think it looks fantastic. There you go. Nice, simple edit. I think that is a good one to end it on. Thank you for joining us. If you found this to be valuable, please watch our other videos. We have something like, what, 60 plus videos? I don't know, infinity videos. They're all on YouTube. Come watch them. They're really fun. They're all community images. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Very important. You'll get one of these a week. You get a little ding ding and like another cool video on editing and making your photos look amazing. Also, if you don't even own Mastin Labs, you should join our Facebook community. We will welcome you with open arms. You can come in, you can drop off a few raw files. Either I or Casey or Kyle or one of our 56,000 community members will edit it for you with any preset you like and show you what is possible with your work, which is super cool. So people are just like dying to do it for you. They love it. So join us. But thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to see you next week, and happy editing.